Hello and welcome. This is To Your Point. I'm Jeff Allen, your host and moderator. We had our pilot show last month. It was a rousing success, so the network has picked us up for a full run. And if you missed the first one, shame on you. But we are glad you're here for episode 2, and we present this as a roundtable discussion about UCF sports and UCF adjacent topics that will feature 3 panelists who cover and contribute to the various social media, podcast, and journalistic endeavors. And as we roll out the first question, I will introduce each of our panelists as they come up for their turn here in the quad box. And topic number 1, now that the dust has settled, how do you feel about the return of Scott Frost and how the rebuild is starting? And we will start first with the man who covers all things UCF for the Orlando Sentinel, Matt Murschel. Matt, thanks for joining us.
Well, thanks for having me. I think initially, there was a lot of surprise, obviously, when Scott was named, the head coach. I think over the last week or so, week and a half, I think you started to get a little bit adjusted to it. I think as he starts to develop his staff and starts to hire some guys, we knew Mackenzie Milton probably was going to be in that mix, so that was a huge hire for them. Sean Beckton coming back was a bigger hire. But then there's some hires that were kind of like scratching your head a little bit. You look at the offensive coordinator's position, with Steve Cooper, Alex Grinch being hired yesterday as defensive coordinator. I'm sure that stirred up the pot a lot, with on social media. And then, you just kind of see those hires and you're thinking, okay, how is this staff going to come together and fit? So I'm not 100% like this is the greatest hire they've ever made at this point, but I'm feeling confident at least that the idea that this is going to be a different looking team that we've seen over the last couple of years.
All right. Next up, the man for whom the mailbag is named after for the Suns Live show. And of course, the champion of all things of the color gold, we bring you Brian W. Peterson.
Hello, gentlemen. Good evening. Glad to be here. So, Scott Frost coming back is obviously the exciting news that we've had to deal with the last couple of weeks. If you had told me that this was the pick and this is where we were going to be just a few weeks ago, I would have said, you're crazy. This is never going to happen. And of course, here we are. This was, to me, in my mind, this was more of a vibes hire by Terry. I'm not sure that Scott was necessarily his first pick when looking at the available coaches to fill the role now that Coach Gus Malzahn has left for Tallahassee and Florida State. But this is certainly a hire that has gotten the fan base energized, right? Lots of fans are really happy to see Scott Frost come back to UCF and try to recreate some of the magic of his 2017 season. Obviously, 2017 was a bit of lightning in the bottle. Lightning doesn't necessarily strike twice, but it has the potential to, right? So as Scott said during his initial presser, if they build this thing correctly, if they make the right hires and they get the right people in the right positions and find the right players, they can really build this program and do what he wanted to do with it just a few short years ago when he was here and left to go to that other place, as he said, the last place that he was at. So it's exciting. I'm really curious to see what he does. And obviously there have been some announcements as coaches have been named recently. Defensive coordinator, offensive coordinator. We've seen Mackenzie come back, as Matt alluded to. So a lot of buzz around the program, but we're just getting started, right? So we're going to have to see what happens, what kind of roster he builds, and who he fills out the coaching staff with.
All right, Brian, thank you. And finally, we bring you a frequent contributor for Suns programming and also through the written word on the Suns website, Dali Drama.
Thank you for having me, Jeff, Brian, Matt. Always a pleasure to cut it up with you guys. Listen, I think anyone outside, albeit, prime Deion Sanders, this was a home run hire for what we were looking at. I think the cycle was kind of B- at best of the candidates that were out there. I think John Summerall's a little bit miffed that Bill Belichick took his job at UNC. The cycle is just a little bit out of sync. Barry Odom kind of overpaid for a dead-end Big Ten job, didn't win the Mountain West championship, just kind of a journeyman as well after leaving Missouri. I was a little bit worried that was going to be our guy, being as President Cartwright had worked with him back back in Columbia. But I'm glad with what we got. I think this is the excitement that we needed for the program at this time. I do think it's a little bit funny. The last 4 years we've been sold on the future of college football, and then Terry went into the bag for the nostalgia pick from his predecessor for before. But in this new NIL era, you look at Texas Tech right now, that has a galvanized booster base that the people want wins. And I think, to kind of push our purse strings of what our donor base is here, you needed a splash hire to kind of get people back into the fold. I think there was a lot of investment before this last season, and just some people that didn't work out as far as, who you pick in the portal. But you can have the best NIL on paper, just on the ledger, but you got to pick the right guys. So I think we have someone that knows how to evaluate talent, someone that puts immense, focus on developing quarterback play. If you think about it, he got Mackenzie Milton here that then recruited Dylan Gabriel, and Dylan Gabriel was a Heisman finalist. And there's tons of, Hawaiian connections and just across the board that he can kind of bring in. So I'm excited for it to see. I rather this a little bit off season of a little bit, less graphics and booms if it ends up with actual development in a bowl game. And I don't want a 4-8 season where, I have a white guy fair catching and not running the ball for the rest of the half of the year. So I'm excited to see it. It's a frost warning and back in Orlando.
Hey Dali, you mentioned that some of these other coaches that were in the rotation, the John Summeralls and the Barry Odoms. One of the advantages, and this could turn out to be a good thing or a bad thing depending on how his second tenure turns out here. But I don't think that we have to worry about Scott Frost leaving a second time, like you would have had to worry about had you brought in a Barry Odom or John Summerall, something like that may have just used UCF, as we have seen coaches in the past do, as a bit of a stepping stone. So that's going to be an interesting thing to take a look at as we watch the second half of Scott Frost's career here at UCF develop.
Yeah, and I don't think anyone would have hired him but us. And if he's our guy, he's our guy. We'll go through our looks with him, but he kind of got us the ticket to the ball. We ran it back in 2018, but he kind of got us on the radar, and running it back in 2018 kind of showed that who we are, who we were. But if the portal existed and NIL ended in 2017, I think that would have just been a one-hit wonder for us. So let's just give him the keys again to see if we can strike magic once more.
And I think, for you guys' point, I think bringing Scott back is a perfect timing in a way, because this is a guy who did more with less back in 2016 and 2017. And I'm not saying that UCF's at a point where they have less, but I think you look at going into the Big 12, they're just getting their first full media share this next year, so look at the first full Big 12 payment, which will be huge for them. But trying to build on that, you can get a lot. You can go out and recruit guys and use NIL differently maybe than a guy like Gus Malzahn did, or an established coach like a Barry Odom, someone who comes in. I think Scott's going to use things a little bit differently. I think it's going to help benefit them in the long run.
To your point, Matt.
By the way, that's 2 bell rings for using the show name.
UCF has been known for doing more with less, right? So, like you said, we have, less to work with in a way with some of, in comparison to our Big 12 counterparts out there. So let's see what Scott can do with less this time.
Yeah, I tell you what interested me too. So, there's been a lot of wave of emotion in all this, right? Because, when Scott's name first came up, there's like, I don't know about a 2.0. He gets hired, he wins the press conference, and we go back up to a high. Obviously, KZ coming on to be the quarterback coach is a big hit for him. And by the way, he's already done the quarterback coach job at UCF with Dylan Gabriel and with Travis up at Florida State. So he's already done that job. And then, of course, a couple of hires that, brought a lot of heat on social media, to be frankly honest. And but then I think we get a lot of positive with, Kenny Martin being retained on staff too. So it's been quite a bit of ebb and flow as far as that goes. So let's move on to our second topic. Speaking of former Knights, what do you think of the infusion of Knights coaches and players to Florida State University? Brian, you take the lead this time.
Florida State did us solid by hiring Coach Gus Malzahn away to go be their offensive coordinator. As I said in the last topic, if you had told me that this is where we were going to wind up even just a few weeks ago, not only with Scott Frost as our head coach, but Gus Malzahn as the offensive coordinator up in Tallahassee, I mean, nobody could have predicted that this was going to happen the way that it did. And Florida State, again, they really did do us a big favor. We were looking at, if Terry was seriously considering getting rid of Gus at the end of the 2024 season, which some indications were he was seriously considering, I mean, we were looking at a $12 million buyout. And like Matt said, we are not getting that full revenue share from the Big 12 yet. That doesn't come until, is it 25 or 26?
It's 25.
25. Okay, so it starts next year, but we don't have that cash lying around. And a lot of that cash that we're going to get is going to be earmarked for other things. So this was a major stepping stone or stepping point for Terry to have to get over. And FSU came in and took him off our hands, and now we get to start fresh. Now, obviously, it stinks to see some of the turnover that Gus is going to take with him. Herb Hand, the offensive line coach, is going to be a hard one to lose. He's going to go up there to Tallahassee with them. He was a well-respected offensive line coach. Not that our offensive line was anything stellar these last few years, but just from a consistency standpoint, you would like to see some of these coaches stay behind. But more power to Florida State. I wish them the best of luck. I'd rather be in our position than be the ones hiring them up in Tallahassee.
All right, Dali, what's your thought on that?
I always think if I could do it all over again, I'd go into the coaching profession, because it is the fraternity of all fraternities. As far as you failed here, well, you got 4 wins. I only got 2 wins. Let's double my win total this year. I mean, what was he looking down here to see? What was the upside? Now, I'm going to give you, you got Gus Malzahn as an incredible recruiter, an incredible person, man of faith, definitely built the man off of the football field as far as being a steward for our program. But just these last few years has been in total decline. And I think from the get-go, I think Gus probably wasn't the right fit for us. In the moment, it seemed great. We had Auburn footing the bill for him to come here. He's coming here with SEC pedigree. We didn't know at that time that we were going to the Big 12. That happens in 21 and kind of jumpstarts. So we kind of start looking ahead. I think you're going to have our guys that are leaving up there. It's the natural symptom of a coaching change in this portal era. He definitely took his, one of his bell cow recruits from the 25 class in Javon Boggs, Mr. Florida, #1 recruit as far as wide receiver for the state. So he's going to be impressive there, but that kid has also flipped like 3 or 4 other places too. So he can kind of plinko his way down to Orlando as well. And, get ready to learn jet sweep if you haven't, watched any of the other tape on that year. So I think that's fascinating. I am worried about having Gus in the state of Florida still, as far as the recruiting trail. He has insight into what our NIL structure is, what our payments are. Granted, that's all going in-house in a year or so. But I think he has an idea of, kind of a ballpark of what we can get for kids. And I also think that there's a different caliber of talent that's going to walk in more regularly at Florida State than would here. I think Gus had to do a little bit more of a sell job here as a budding upstart program. Florida State is obviously an established brand. And I think that'll bode well for Gus up there. I mean, he doesn't have to worry about the portal anymore, shaking hands. He's kind of in the twilight of his career. I think he loves to call plays. I think I think when he would game plan, he would just know what he wanted to do and kind of impose his will. And sometimes you just need SEC freak athletes or dudes to kind of make that happen. That's why he took Herb Hand with him, comfortable with an O-line coach, taking up Tim Harris. Tim Harris has never coached wide receivers before, but I guess he's the wide receivers coach up there now. So just something to be in the mix up there. Obviously, he has his throwback with Norvell over at Tulsa, how that came to be. I'm most kind of surprised of the Stockholm syndrome that I think Tommy Castellanos has of coming all the way from Boston College down to here. He wanted to come back this year. They said, no, we're going to run it back. We'll run it with KJ. That didn't work out. And then he quits the team at Boston College. So it's very bizarre, but apparently it's a pretty hefty NIL payment up in Tallahassee for those servers. So I think it'll be different to see what he runs. I think it'll be funny to see how he kind of undersells us or kind of recruits against us in the whole mix. But I think at the very end of the day, I think we got very lucky. They're footing a $12 million bill. They didn't have to pay us $6 million to take him either. And I think he's only getting less than 1.5 a year to do the OC at Florida State. So I think he'll be very successful up there. I think he's always had a penchant for that little bit more of the upper S tier of college football. I think sometimes when he was here, he would kind of look down at, this is the amount of people in my press junket. At Florida State, he had 25, 30 just for an introductory presser. So I think we're in a better spot. I think, again, it only would have worked if we swapped out kind of like the old and the new of getting back to what kind of brought us the belt to the ball with a Frost. But looking at a Barry Odom, I was worried it's just going to be another SEC retread like Gus as well. So yeah. I think we're in a good spot.
And of course, Matt, what do you think about FSU's rebrand to UCF North?
Well, it's funny. I got an email from a couple of FSU fans over the last couple of weeks, and they're kind of concerned all these UCF coaches and players are going up there. I mean, I think I think that they're I made the joke once in a press conference. It's going to be UCF North. By the time it's all said and done, when you get everyone going up there. But I think listen, I sat down with Gus before this past season. And we talked a lot about his wanting to be the play caller. And he talked how much his passion is being a play caller. And for him to have to give that up this year, I think that really hurt him a lot. And I understand he understands exactly why he had to do it. But I think it really got to him. And I think so the idea that when Mike Norvell came to him and said, come up here and be the play caller up here, run our offense, we need a guy who can do this. I think he was that's what really attracted him to it. I also think you're right about this idea of he doesn't have to deal with the transfer portal. He doesn't have to deal with NIL so much. So it's not in his face all the time. I think when you're a head coach now in today's college football world, it's in your face at all times. You got kids coming up to you every week asking for more money, asking for this, asking for that. And I think as an offensive coordinator, you don't necessarily have to worry about that. You can say, okay, go over here and talk to Mike Norvell. What I find interesting about this move is, Mike Norvell's been the play caller everywhere he's been. He's not like he's hired guys to be his offensive coordinator, but they've been kind of in a support role more than anything. Gus flat out said in his introductory press conference, I'm going to be calling plays. Okay, I want to see how that works out with Mike Norvell, because there's two strong-minded guys who are going to be there kind of butting heads a little bit when it comes to which play are we running, who's doing this, who's doing that. Now, maybe this is Mike Norvell trying to say, okay, I need to give up more control so, I can work on other things on this team. But that's going to be interesting. Plus, you bring in Herb Hand, who's going to help out with the offensive line. And you mentioned Tim Harris Jr. working out receivers. I think you're going to see some former players go up there from UCF. They're going to probably wind up there, maybe one or two. And it's going to be an interesting fit with Tommy Castellanos. I mean, again, he had relative success at Boston College, but he's going to come into an area where now there's going to be a lot more eyes on him at Florida State than there were at Boston College, believe me. And as you mentioned, Dali, about the press conferences, they're not going to have 5 or 6 guys there. Trace and I are going to be sitting in the front row, peppering Gus with questions. There's going to get a pretty good amount of group of guys there, especially a lot more national media who might pop in and want to talk to Gus. So there's going to be a lot more attention and a lot more scrutiny under him at this position as well.
By the way, the executive producer has dropped us a couple of notes. Gus's salary, 1.5, $2 million, and then 2.5. And then the 3-year deal. Do you think Gus fulfills that full contract?
I think he got pretty lucky. I think he's always had that eye on that Arkansas job. Mm-hmm. So if he didn't get moved this cycle, I think Sexton is the agent for Norvell and Gus as well. I think there was a point too of just like these astronomical buyout contracts are getting a little bit ridiculous. You saw Norvell's giving $4.5 million of his contract back and kind of rolling into the war chest for the NIL there. I think the whole days of just that huge buyout and just kind of right into the sunset with that are a little bit over now that, there's going to be fan bases and administrations that want some skin in the game from these coaches, excuse me. So I don't know if he'll do I think he could do a solid 2 years. I mean, I think they can kind of bounce back from 2 to 6 wins pretty easily if they just get the right signal caller. Their just quarterback play was atrocious this year. But I think Gus's move is 2 years, and really a 3-year deal is really 2. And then you just kind of keep on adding a year till kind of what you get after that. So I think he'd love to maybe go back to the SEC. I think a place like Arkansas, a place that has like Walmart money for NIL that he can just kind of walk in there. It's just kind of interesting to see if Gus, when he was at Auburn, like the owners of Yellowwood, if that was not anything was was under the table. It was just all up front. I think he could have done some real damage with some booster support back in the day. So I think he'll do 2 years. I think he'll be successful. He'll be solid. Less on his plate. I think he enjoys a little bit more of the good old boy network instead of kind of building into something new, like in Orlando. And Tallahassee, that's only 3 hours away from where he made his bones in Auburn. So I think he'll be good there.
I think a lot of what happens to Gus over the next 3 years is directly tied to Mike Norvell and whether or not he stays in the head coach role at Florida State. I mean, Matt mentioned he had people from Florida State reach out to him. I've had tons of people, friends of mine that are Florida State alums and fans that have reached out to me to ask me about, hey, what about Gus? What are your thoughts on him? What do you think about his offense? He's going to be ROC. Just because their fan base is so dejected after this year that they kind of gave up on college football after the first couple of games of the season. So they really have not been following along.
And what are you telling those friends, Brian?
Yeah, well, I tell them to get ready for jet sweeps and lots of running. Square peg into the round hole for those of you that get that analogy.
Iconic quote.
Yeah, but tell me if this sounds familiar. You've got a football program where the head coach has had to give up play calling, bring in somebody else to call the plays, and perhaps there's going to be some conflict between the head coach who wants to call plays and the offensive coordinator who's going to call plays. I mean, just ring a bell if that sounds familiar. Exactly.
And let's not forget too that Florida State is going through as a program is going through a lot of other stuff as well. You've got them in the lawsuit with the ACC. You don't know where that's going to go in a couple of years. Money is going to be an issue at some point with the school. They can't keep spending the money they can be. So you got to wonder if Norvell, if he struggles in the first couple of years, do they have enough to buy him out? Do they get him out? And then it does set up kind of nicely, as you mentioned, for Gus to be right there. They could say, Gus, go ahead and step in and take over. And you don't really have to bring in a ton of coaches, that you've already got some guys there who are your guys. So, it's going to be very interesting how that all kind of comes down over the next couple of years.
He could also tell him too, you know what, Mike, this buyout deal is pretty sweet too. Just hire me on, and that's a lot of coin for this next decade. I mean, someone's going to have to pay. I don't know why these schools keep, how they keep getting got by these agents like that, but it'll be interesting these next few years. We'll definitely be watching though, so it'll be fun.
Yeah,
well, go ask Jimbo Fisher, by the way, when you're talking about buyouts.
Yeah.
Jimbo's enjoying about $75 million right now. So.
Yes, I wish the real world worked that way, right? Pay me to do nothing.
Just go away.
Yeah, would love that. All right, we're going to introduce a new segment to the program. See, second episode, we're already doing new things. And it's called Rank 'em. And this idea was actually a little inside baseball, was kind of born before the first episode. The panelists were debating certain foods at restaurants. And I thought, this could be a good segment to rank things like this. So we're going to do that one another time, because right now it's the holiday season. We are going to rank Christmas movies. So I have asked each of our panelists to rate their top 5 Christmas movies. And Dali, you get to be the first.
All right, so for this, a little bit of eclectic mix. I just realized all these movies are before 2003 too. So I'm sure I can't believe I'm actually getting up there a little bit. But I got number 5, Love Actually. It's Hugh Grant, big ensemble cast. It's comedy. It's a little raunchy, but all the stories kind of interweave, and it's a good tale. It's the backdrop of Christmas is in there, and it's a good time. Number 4, I got Jingle All the Way. With Arnold Schwarzenegger and Sinbad. Dad's trying to get the toy for Christmas. Hilarity ensues. Early 90s fun movie. Just a 90 minutes of mindlessness that's super fun that I enjoy. Number 3, I got Just Friends. This is from the high school days, where you have Ryan Reynolds kind of goes back to town. He loses some weight. Big shot California agent now, and he goes back to New Jersey, tries to get back to the love of his high school and kind of impress her. Turns out the other dweeb got cool too, so they're going back and forth at it. Number 2, I got a classic, Home Alone 1, not Home Alone 2. There was a big debate about which sequel is better. Home Alone 2 just annoys me because Home Alone 2, Lost in New York, you can't get lost in New York. It's literally a grid. So go up, one up, and to the left and over. I just enjoy the first one. It's classic. The the booby traps, the gadget, Joe Pesci getting pissed off, the spider. It's incredible. And then number 1, I got the Santa Claus. I remember watching that as a kid, early 90s with Tim Allen. A little bit of the meta that, Santa Claus is on the roof. Tim Allen has to become Santa Claus, and then your parents are actually Santa Claus. So I've always enjoyed that one. So that would round up my number 1 for the holiday movies.
All right, Matt, how about yours?
Well, my list is very eclectic, and I apologize in advance for that because I like a little bit of everything. So I'm going to start at number 5 with Violent Night. You remember that one that just came out a couple of years ago? It's kind of a horror movie. It was tied around with Christmas. It was actually kind of a fun movie. I enjoyed it, and I thought people, I don't know if I'd put it in with the kids, but it was a movie that I thought was great with Christmas time. I followed that up with a foreign movie called Rare Exports. If you get a chance to watch, it's pretty fun. It has to do with Santa Claus and finding Santa Claus. So I throw that in there as well. My third one is, I think everyone has seen this one, Muppet Christmas Movie. I mean, come on, you got that was one of those movies growing up that, you always used to love to watch and put on in the house when you were making cookies or something like that. My number 2 is The Bishop's Wife. I'm going to go back to, in the black and white era, with Cary Grant, obviously, and it was one of the classics going there for that. And then number 1 was a movie that, again, I think people kind of you have to look up a little bit, as it's called A Man Who Came to Dinner. And it's a classic movie my wife and I have watched over the years, and something's a little different. So not your usual type that like Dali was talking about, but I go a little bit to some of the classics.
All right, Brian.
Okay, so I also have a fairly eclectic group here. Dali, we're probably going to disagree on something. We'll get to that in a minute. Be prepared. Let's start with number 5. And everybody knows that Die Hard is a Christmas movie. So if Die Hard is a Christmas movie, that's not my pick. If Die Hard is a Christmas movie, I'm going to go with my Christmas movie being Batman Returns. All right. For those 90 kids out there,
that's a good one.
Batman Returns. It takes place during the Christmas time. Mm-hmm. Everybody loves Michael Keaton. Okay, Michelle Pfeiffer's Catwoman. Enough said. Number four. I'm also going to go with the Santa Claus. Santa Claus was a classic when I was growing up. Dali nailed it on the head. Tim Allen, Christmas, good time. So that's number 4. Number 3, A Christmas Story. It's a classic. I'm sure everyone has seen A Christmas Story. They actually just came out with a sequel. It was like 3 years ago now. They actually had the original guy that played Ralphie return and reprise the role. So A Christmas Story, got to watch it once a year for Christmas time. Number 2, The Nightmare Before Christmas.
That's a good one.
Tim Burton. It's great because it doubles as both a Halloween and a Christmas movie, so you get to watch it twice in 1 year. And number 1, drum roll please, Home Alone 2. Home Alone 2, not Home Alone 1. Home Alone 2, Lost in New York. Definitely the superior movie. You got the talk boy, you got the turtle doves, you got dad yelling at the end. You spent $8,000 on room service. Tim Curry, come on, Rob Schneider, you can't go wrong.
Trump is in that.
Yeah.
Trump is in that one.
Down the hall to the left. Yeah, absolutely.
I just got annoyed with Home Alone 2. It was just like, the first one, it was cute. He got left in the attic. The Home Alone 2 is just like, you're a negligent parent. They're literally, they're out of the country at that time. And then they go to Miami and it's great. Yeah, they go to Miami and it's raining and they're talking. I don't know. I just like the first one. Just kind of sets the tone.
I like the first. I must say this. I like the first one because of John Candy. I love John Candy in that movie. When he the polka and he gives the wife the ride back home to the house. I mean, that to me is one of the better small cameos in a movie that you see with John Candy. Yes. I'm just a huge John Candy fan, so I think that worked really well.
Outstanding. All right, so my top 5 goes as follows, and it'll probably say a lot about my personality, which is probably not a good thing. But number 5. This is probably the one of the only serious ones that make my list. A Christmas Carol, which of course there are hundreds of versions. I think my wife has watched every single one of them. My favorite is the Patrick Stewart version from 1999. Mm-hmm. Number 4, we got a lot of love for the Santa Claus. That's on my list as well. Number 3, Home Alone 1.
Oh, yeah.
I thought he was going to say 3. I was really
That would have been a good swerve. Absolutely. Number 2 for me is Christmas Vacation.
Oh, that's a great one.
That's an awesome movie. And my number 1, Die Hard is a Christmas movie. Adam, the EP has Elf was almost on my list. I debated on that one hard. That's a great movie also.
It's a Wonderful Life.
Miracle on 34th Street. There's all sorts of
Rudolph the Red-Nosed Reindeer.
Yes. And my thing with Die Hard is, wouldn't it be a great if, it became a thing if somebody said Merry Christmas and you respond Yippee-ki-yay? I mean, good stuff, guys. I like that list. I'm going to check out some of those eclectic choices of bats for sure. Good stuff.
Yeah, I gotta say, I'm all over the board, and I know it makes it. We have a giant box of Christmas movies my wife has bought over the years, and so when this time of year comes around, we just like to throw them in and just spend a day, just watching different ones. So it's a good way to kind of pass the time.
Yeah, absolutely. All right, getting back to the theme of the show. Let's get back to our topics, and our third topic is the Heisman Award. Do you agree that it should have been Travis Hunter, or do you think it should have gone to Ashton Jeanty? Matt, of course, is the only one in our quad box who actually has a Heisman vote. So, Matt, take it away.
Yeah, I mean, I had Travis Hunter as my Heisman winner, and based on what I saw this season, and seeing him in person, the idea that he played both offense and defense, and not just a little bit, he was putting significant time on both sides of the football. His performance, I just thought, gave him just a little bit of a nudge. I went back and forth with him and Ashton Jeanty. I mean, believe me, Jeanty had a great year. What did he finish? Third? The third greatest rushing season, in a while. But I had Travis and just kind of edging him over there as well, and so that's where I put him there. I think I had Dylan at third, Dylan Gabriel at third. I liked how he performed this season, but I could have also had Cam Ward there. When you got to the third spot, I felt you could be Dylan or Cam Ward at that point. But Travis, I felt like should have been the number one guy. It was the number one guy in the college football this year.
Brian.
I really feel bad for Ashton Jeanty because I think that in any other season, he probably would have had a very good chance to actually win the Heisman, which is too bad because, you always want to see, a group of 5 guy up there and get his dues. I just think that Travis Hunter just happened to be such a generational talent this time around. And he just got, it was the luck of the draw that he happened to have his great season in the same season that Travis Hunter was, his name was on the ballot as well. I don't see how you can pick anybody other than Travis Hunter just because, like Matt said, to his point, that he's playing 2 positions and he's good at both positions, right? He's on the field all the time. So I don't see how you could have voted for anybody other than Travis Hunter. I feel terrible for Ashton Jeanty because what an amazing season he's had, and we've seen, it comes to mind Kevin Smith, when he was in a similar position, and he finished further on down in the Heisman voting, didn't get a lot of attention. He had a great season, just like Ashton Jeanty did. And I think that any other season that he would have had a much stronger position in the voting. It just happened to be this season that it went to Travis Hunter.
Dali?
Ashton Jeanty won the Doak Walker Award. He also won the Maxwell Award. Most outstanding player and the best running back in the country, okay?
His trophy case isn't going to be hurting.
His trophy case isn't hurting. He's also in the first 12-team playoff, the inaugural 12-team playoff. Yeah. He's going to run angry. He has some little more energy, motivation in the tank. I think, the Heisman is, the best overall player in college football. And Travis Hunter was a force for the culture and in the zeitgeist that was Boulder this year in the 2024 season. He shined or outshined at times with Deion Sanders, Coach Prime, and Shedeur Sanders on his team, and he won the Heisman. Granted, there could have been some stat padding for some games. You play the games, you play the reps. He was phenomenal. Second defensive player since Charles Woodson to get it. Michigan in 97. So then I decided to look at, kind of what was Woodson doing back in 97 when he was a defensive back and he decided to be a wide receiver, 11 catches for 231 and 2 touchdowns. So, he was dabbling being a wide receiver. Travis Hunter had 92 catches, over 11,000 yards and 14 touchdowns. And then on the defensive side, 32 tackles, 4 interceptions, and 11 pass breakups. So it wasn't just he was doing I'd play the other side of the ball and dabble. He was a factor on both sides. Okay. So much as a factor, he elevated that program in the time that he's been there. He started off at an FCS school in Jackson State, and then went with Prime, where he was originally committed to go to Florida State. It's almost that he was undeniable in his ability. And he's such a great dude, just off the field, meeting with kids. We saw it in the bounce house. I do think it's funny that that'll be forever in the Heisman highlight reel. That first time he really hit the Heisman pose in the end zone. I was just like, oh my goodness, like that's going to be replayed. And sure enough, that was the one that they used on Saturday night for all the highlights. Just cut it out. I looked at the jersey. I go, yep, that's the combination of black and gold I wish we wore that day. So I'm excited for him. I think it was a great narrative for Brett Yormark in the Big 12 to have a Big 12 winner there. I think you're going to have some juice for the Alamo Bowl now. Now it's Colorado versus BYU. I mean, the last Heisman winner that wasn't an Oklahoma quarterback was RG3 at Baylor, and he played in the Alamo Bowl as well. So I think that'll be great for the league. I think it's going to be exciting. Ashton Jeanty will always have, in the Parthenon of great backs, he's top 5, but I think he's going to have, it'd be funny if you don't win the Heisman, but you don't have a chance to play for a national championship. I wonder if they would switch with that. There's a very elite club for that Heisman. I think they're both in the right spot of what they did for the season, but any other year that, Travis Hunter doesn't exist, Ashton Jeanty could have definitely walked away with the hardware.
Before I throw a follow-up question on this, I would have voted for Jeanty myself. What a year,
Sorry,
right?
Jeff.
Because what a year, though, when you think about, the things that are very rare. Two-way player, very rare. 2,000 plus yards, although it's been done a little bit more often, is still very rare. So it made this decision very, very difficult. What I liked about some of Jeanty's numbers is that he had more rushing yards than 115 of the 134 FBS teams, 7 of which are in the college football playoff. That's pretty darn impressive. He's over 800 yards more than number 2 rusher, Hampton from North Carolina. 29 touchdowns. Yeah, I think, in a different year, it's his. But you also got to admit, Travis Hunter did have, a bigger program, and there was a hype machine there. I mean, you can't deny that as well, but certainly play into that as well. So there you go. That's the follow-up question would be, though, as far as Travis Hunter is, how do you think his game will translate to the National Football League?
Well, I think it's going to be interesting because I think there'll be some, depending on where he gets drafted, I think there'll be some teams who want to use him in both aspects. They'll try to, much like Dion did, in the NFL, they'll try to put him out in both spots. But I think it'll be a little different. I think some teams may shy away from that idea. They may just want to use him as either a receiver or as a defensive back. I think he's a much better receiver in some ways than a defensive back. So, I think they may try to use him in that way. But someone's going to want to take the chance and try to use them both sides of the football. And that'll probably be part of the discussion that Travis and his people will probably have with an NFL team is, I want to play both sides. Is this going to be an opportunity for me? Or are you going to limit me to one way?
Yeah, I think it just depends on who has the number 1 overall pick. I mean, if you're jockeying now, you have Las Vegas and my New York Football Giants. You're going to have Las Vegas.
Dali.
Yeah, seriously. You're going to have the Las Vegas Raiders. I think they've been kind of chummy. Their ownership has been chummy with Shedeur Sanders. And then if you had a Travis Hunter come to New York, it'll just be interesting to see, if you don't have a quarterback to kind of throw to him, what is it going to be the situation? I think you're definitely going to have a role for him. I think, the biggest thing for him will be, I think his game will definitely obviously translate. I think he has the work ethic. He showcased that 2 different levels at 2 different universities. I think he's got a good head on his shoulders as well. But I'm just most excited for, he is so damn marketable. And I think he'll be very good in a market like New York. So I'd love to see him up there if we could be a little bit patient with him. But that would be a pretty nasty receiving core with Neighbors, with Hunter. When you get the right guy in there, it could be some magic.
Gonna need a quarterback.
I have to put my business hat on here for a minute. If I'm an NFL evaluator, I'm not taking him to be any sort of defensive back filling role. Okay, he's not big enough to be a defensive back in the NFL. And if I'm Travis Hunter, I want to be on the field just enough to make that big payday and get my big paycheck and get my endorsements and not get injured. If he's not the biggest guy, not to say he's not big enough for the NFL sort of thing, but he's not your prototypical defensive back in the NFL. So it's probably easier for him to play the primary role of receiver, the thing that he's probably best at, over playing defensive back, and kind of fill like a Tyreek Hill, quick receiver type role. And that's where he's going to find most of his success. I don't know that if I'm taking him in the draft, if I'm an NFL evaluator, that I'm going to take the risk that one of my primary receivers is going to get hurt on a defensive play. That just sounds like asking for trouble.
Well, the old adage, like, if you can't catch the ball, you're playing DD. You're not playing wide receiver. So.
Yeah. I think I'd be interested to know if there's ever been anybody that was features on the college football game and then could also make the Madden cover. You think about it. Because he has an opportunity to do that, and I don't think that's ever happened. And it would be kind of interesting to see if he's able to, because I'm sure Madden would love. They already had a good relationship with him for the college football game, so why not maybe think about it for Madden if he has a good strong season? So
was Tebow never on the Madden cover? I don't think he was.
I don't think he was out, right? I think not Madden, or not Madden. I thought you were talking about NCAA.
He was on the cover for one of the last NCAA games.
Yeah, he wasn't on Madden. I mean, that was the guy who did it at the next level as well. That's the other thing too, is you have someone that's so stellar in the college game, and then when they go to the NFL, it's just kind of every guy's a man on that side of the ball,
Yeah.
All right, so now we're going to move off football. Let's turn our attention to the basketball team, with the non-conference portion of the schedule set to finish off on Saturday. How do you assess where they are going to be when they move into conference play? That starts on New Year's Eve at Texas Tech. Brian.
The men's basketball program has been an interesting one to follow this season. It's been a lot of fun. I mean, the Knights are 8-2 on the season right now. I was actually at the game on Saturday, the Orange Bowl Classic, when they beat Tulsa, and thank God they finally beat Tulsa in something. I was quite worried going into that game just because of the opponent and who they were. The thing about the Knights with the basketball thing, and if I'm Coach Johnny Dawkins, one of the things that I'm looking at as we get set to get into Big 12 play is that we have gotten off to a slow start in almost every game that we have played so far this season. It feels like we just come out flat-footed, and we have to, come from behind in a lot of ways, find our momentum in the second half, and really close the game out in the second half. This is going to be a slog in Big 12 conference play once this starts. We're not playing Tulsa's anymore. We're going into the Big 12. And we're going to be seeing teams like Houston, Cincinnati, who we're familiar with, but then we're also going to have the big boys, right? We're going to have the Kansas and all these other Big 12 teams that are very, very good on the court. So if I'm Johnny Dawkins, I'm concerned with getting my team up and running, getting off to a fast start in each of these games, and maintaining that lead and not having to come from behind, because that's the big thing that has seemed to be the issue so far this season. And we've been able to overcome it against teams that we've played in the non-conference schedule, but we're not going to be able to do that at all once Big 12 play starts.
All right, Dali.
Basketball, man. I think if you look at it, if Frost is back in the building, I think we looked at basketball last year as a kind of a reprieve for inaugural year in the Big 12. That was the only juice that we had. And we looked like we had something there. So the NIL coffers kind of opened up a little bit. We brought in some guys in the portal. We needed scoring. We brought in Keyshawn Hall, Ivy Curry to give Darius Johnson some help. They all rank in the top 20 for scoring this year thus far in the Big 12. Had some fun games, FAU, high scoring affair, but the defensive side just wasn't there. We fell back early in that game as well. Did it again back and forth with Tulsa. Some close games, wanted to see us pull out one of the two in the Greenbrier Classic. Went to the, I think it was triple overtime against LSU. Wisconsin just had our number that Friday, but we did beat Texas A&M. They're ranked number 12 in the country. And the SEC is having a stellar year this year. They're the 14th team ranked in the SEC thus far. So I think Johnny Dawkins is going to pick his spots. I think we have some interesting matchups, some games on paper that look that we're going to be scary at home, maybe are a little bit easier. And Arizona is not so great. Kansas State is kind of falling apart. I'd love to see him head to the tournament this year. You bought Adam Hood in to kind of get some more flow on the offensive side. That's evident. You can see that. Maybe we've been letting some of the defensive side kind of go by the wayside. I know Johnny harps on that, pretty steadfastly, but I want to see where we fit into the rotation, Sellers and Mikey as well. Those guys have been injured for a little bit, unless Dawkins was saying, let's just wait till conference play to bring him in. Last year, he did the same thing where he brought in some wrinkles, a defensive set that Kansas had never seen before on tape for the last year's season. And then we kind of ousted the number 3 team in the country that weekday. So I think it'll be interesting. I think the vibes need to kind of build over year to year. The culture is still kind of going. I think of UCF as like my home. That's where my degree is. And UCF football would be the pool. You're in the pool all the time. You enjoy the pool. UCF basketball was like the jacuzzi. You enjoy it when the weather gets a little bit colder. But if the jacuzzi doesn't work, it's all right. You still got the pool year round. If the pool's not working, that's a little bit different. And I think he gave us some good juice this last year to kind of show us, he is competing in the SEC of his sport. In basketball, and there's a lot of pedigree and a lot of teams and resources in our league. And I think Johnny Dawkins is definitely one of the guys that is doing a lot more with less. So it'll be interesting to see where we come up to this next season. But we open up at Texas Tech on the road for New Year's Eve. I think we may lose that one, but I think we're going to have a formidable home court advantage. And I'm excited to see what Johnny puts together for the rest of the year.
All right, and as we turn it over to Matt, Dali brought up the injured guys and Sellers and Mikey. Any rumblings on when they might be back?
No, actually, Johnny's been very adamant in the fact it's day to day. He keeps saying, I think it's the favorite phrase that every time we ask him about their status, it's been day to day, day to day. I've been under the assumption that it's probably going to be they were holding out till the Big 12 schedule, because I think he felt like Jalen Sellers is there, he's ready. But I don't want to put him in a situation where, maybe he gets hurt or something happens. Although you'd like to believe at some point you want to give him a little bit of work before you get ready to go into the Big 12 play. So we'll see what happens. Mikey, again, is, he had the foot injury. He's been out of the boot for a while. Then he was sick. He had some flu issue, they told us. It's going to be interesting to see how you get those two guys, integrated into that lineup, because you don't want to throw someone off their game just to bring in the two guys. I think Jalen will come in fine. He understands what he has to do. Mikey's a whole different ball game. I mean, he's a young guy who hasn't really had an opportunity to be a starter anywhere. So how they use him, I expect him to probably use more off the bench, at least until he gets himself going at that point. I agree with what Brian said earlier. I mean, they are the slowest starting team I've ever seen. I mean, it was like this last year. I mean, they would start out shooting poorly. They would fall behind, and then they have to rally back hard in the second half to try to find a way to win games. And that's only sustainable for so long. Eventually, it catches up with you. We saw that towards the end of last year, where they weren't able to kind of finish off games. The USF game and the NIT was a great example of that. They just ran out of gas. And I think they've got to do a better job of doing that. They've got a good rotation now. They've got they got good depth. So they can move guys in and out, and they've got some good rotations that Johnny's been able to use. They got to rebound a little bit better, and you'd like to see them shoot better from the three-point line. They've struggled at times with that as well. I think if they can finish 10-10 in the Big 10 this year, or Big 12, I think that'd be a good year for them based on how strong the Big 12 is going to be. And that would get them into especially with some wins over ranked teams, that would get them in the tournament. And I think you'd have a good chance to make a move there as well. So they have to win on the road. They have to win some games on the road. They didn't do that last year in the conference play very well. They've got to win some games on the road if they're going to have an opportunity to do that.
And I think one of the things that I have seen that is the play of Darius Johnson this year is, he looks so relaxed because he now doesn't have to be the guy. He's got scoring options around him. I think this is kind of like the best scoring options team we've had in quite some time. And I think the relaxed way he is playing, he's making great decisions, when to shoot, he's letting the game come to him. And I think that's been a big aspect in what's been keying the success of the team so far. And, if you get Sellers and Mikey into the rotation, this is a 10 deep lineup. Mm-hmm. And that depth is going to be critical in conference play. So I think they've got some good things to work with. And I do agree, Matt. I think, 500 in the Big 12 is definitely gets them in the conversation for the NCAA tournament.
And let's not forget that Mustafa's a young guy. Mustafa's really a young guy who's learning. Every game you see him get a little bit better at certain things. And if they could get him really going and get him kind of strengthened up a little bit, I mean, he can really be a formidable guy in the middle, which is what they really could benefit from. And that would help in their rebounding and shot blocking and things like that. So they have an opportunity maybe to do that. And I think that will help them out as well.
Coach Johnny Dawkins taking a page out of Gus's book, not talking about injuries and we're evaluating them day to day, getting off to slow starts and having to come from behind and not winning on the road. Does that sound familiar?
So Matt, do you and the other reporters, when Johnny says day to day, say, aren't we all?
Pretty much. I mean, that's kind of the way you feel. But I know he's said it a couple times. I think the last time we asked him, he kind of laughed about the idea. He goes, I know I've told you it's day to day, but I mean, it's just we don't even know what Sellers' injury is. I mean, he's never really admitted to what it is. We've kind of come to the assumption it's a back injury, but I mean, he really never gives us details on that. And I understand that. I understand you're trying to be, that's a coaching move, but I mean, still, I think there'd be a better phrase than day to day. We have to think of something else better than day to day.
Yeah. And, and if it is a back injury, those are so unpredictable. I mean, if he sneezes, he could be set back, I mean,
well, let's not forget too, not to throw this up, but Jalen Sellers broke his left hand in August last year. And we didn't know about it until media day this year, when Johnny's walking off the stage and Johnny says, by the way, Jalen broke his hand. And we all went, what? And then we had to rush
He's
over
like,
to
I
Jalen.
told you that, didn't I?
Yeah, he acts like we do that. And we're like, no. So Jalen gave us the whole story. And it was like, we didn't know that. And I think if people had knew that he had a broken hand, his shooting hand especially, I think they maybe would understand a little bit some of the struggles he had in some of those games. So, I mean, that's just how coaches are. Some coaches really don't want to give out enough information. But I think that's an instance where fans would have been more accepting of the fact that Jalen struggled shooting sometimes because he had a broken left hand.
Yeah. All right. About to hit our final segment, which we call nightcaps. So we'll each get to pour a nightcap. Each panelist will get 1 to 2 minutes to monologue about the topic of their choosing. And Dali, you get the first shot.
All right. So Scott Frost isn't just coming back to UCF, a place that he was widely successful at and uses a launch pad for generational wealth. He's coming back to a place where he's dominated since the spry age of 21, the Big 12 Conference. Realignment has completely redrawn the conference ties and affiliations across our country, but many soon forget that Nebraska's dominance was curated in the Big 8 for decades, which then became the Big 12 with the additions of 4 defectors from the Southwest Conference. As a player, Scott Frost went 14-5 against current Big 12 members. As an offensive coordinator at Oregon, head coach at UCF, and Nebraska, he's 9-6, even with how abysmal his time was in Lincoln with a headset. He's woven himself in the fabric of this conference for decades. In 1996, he lost in Tempe to a feisty Sun Devils team led by Pat Tillman that took down the #1 Cornhuskers 19-0. They're now the defending Big 12 champions. He has a deep red hatred for Colorado already in his veins, and I don't think that'll change anytime soon. He took on Dante Culpepper and led UCF in Lincoln, where the Golden Knights led 17 to 14 and a half. We were 34.5-point underdogs, and we were ultimately called the best 0-3 team in the nation after that game in 97. May this be the right leader for us once more. He knows the fervor of Middle America's college towns that are the heartbeat of this conference, that understand how the constant identity changes and understands how to evolve his game and evolve with it. Someone that realizes our potential, always has remarked about it, and sees how remarkable we can truly be. It's not just lip service, star rankings, or catchy slogans, but someone who's actually lived it. The story of redemption is as American as apple pie. Our entire modern-day athletics program was built on the comeback story of one man falling from grace in South Bend. If you look at Frost's resume with your mind, you may wince, but if you look at it with your heart and your gut, it could be special. Ultimately, we needed a winner. We just hired the guy that's done it both at UCF and the Big 12 and our school for the future.
All right. Thank you, Dali. Next up, Brian.
I feel like I'm having to follow up Shaquem Griffin giving that, pump up speech after that. My goodness. Can somebody else go first? I was not prepared for Dali to come out swinging like that. Okay. So my rant is going to be on the patience that UCF fans are going to have to put forward in order for us to build this program going forward, right? We came in with, Gus several years ago. We were all rah. Gus is going to be the guy, and that kind of flopped on its head. And now we're going to have to go through, we're going to have to do a complete rebuild with Scott Frost. And I would argue that Scott Frost is coming into a situation here at UCF that is more dire than it was when he got here at the end of 2015. Okay. In 2016, he was able to take us from winless in 15, 0-12 to 6-7. Call it 6-6 with that bowl loss. 6-6 with a 2016 roster that was heavily built to win. With, as Dali just said, with the transfer portal and NIL now being a factor, we're going to have a situation where Scott Frost is doing a complete, and I cannot stress this enough, a complete rebuild. Half of our roster has entered the portal and is already gone. Some of them are going to continue to look for other homes, and the coaching staff that is still here / has been picked up so far and hired by UCF is scrambling as we speak to try and fill all the gaps. This is not going to be an overnight turnaround. If we win 6 games next season, that would be almost a miracle, I think, at this point. So fans are going to have to be patient. They're going to have to allow this coaching staff to find the right pieces, as Coach Frost alluded to in his introductory presser. I guess it's second introductory presser, if you will. It's going to take time. And I know in this era of NIL and the transfer portal and the society that we're in right now, everybody wants their feel-good, happy moment this second. Well, it's going to take some time, unfortunately. Scott Frost certainly has his work cut out for him. It's not going to be a quick turnaround. We are going to have to be patient. It's going to take him, I would estimate, at least 3 seasons to get this team to where he wants it to be. So don't expect him to be able to pull miracles. And I can already hear some of these UCF fans chirping on social media. I told you Scott Frost wasn't the guy. Next season when 2025 is here, and we're not looking at a bowl game, which is very possible. I told you he wasn't the guy, and these coordinator picks were awful. What was he thinking? Why didn't Terry do a better job? We have to give him some time and give him some patience on our end to be able to do this correctly for the future.
Complete rebuild indeed. Thank you, Brian. All right. Next nightcap is Matt Murschel.
We are 9 days into the transfer portal window, and there have been 6,100 Division I football players who have entered the portal since it's opened. And we've seen an incredible amount of money that supposedly has been thrown around with NIL deals to get players to go from here to here. And then this morning, we hear from the Alabama athletic director, who's upset that his players are being poached away by multiple $1 million deals. I mean, what does that have to say about how crazy college football has been? And the portal being open, when I mentioned all those players, that also counts. At some point, UCF had up to, I think it was almost 30 players in the transfer portal. And some of these guys have moved on and deservedly have maybe some better options moving around, at other schools. And they're going to get some bigger money and more money than what UCF was willing to pay them at the time. But that's just the business of college football where we're at right now. I have people come to me all the time and complain about the way the sport has changed and how they don't like what's going. Well, get ready, because in 6 months, the House settlement begins. And when the House settlement begins and revenue sharing takes over, you're going to see a lot of things change in how we do college athletics. And in fact, it's going to shift more towards probably more of a semi-pro model when it comes to actually roster management and things like that. The thing that stood out to me this week has been the fact that Scott Frost has managed, and the NIL group have managed to convince 6 players to come out of the portal to jump back into the roster. That to me is a bigger win in some regards than signing a guy out of the portal. I think if you could talk players into coming back to your school, whether it's offering them more money or whether it's telling them, listen, we're trying to do something special here, come back and be a part of this. I mean, we're talking about hometown hero guys, Damari Henderson supposedly talked about coming back as well. Nigel Kelly has talked about coming back. We're seeing guys coming back, which I think will be huge for UCF's future. I mean, Scott Frost isn't going to be able to sign the biggest and brightest of the transfer portal guys, probably because of the money that's being put out there. But as we've seen in the past, we saw what he did in 2016. We saw what he did in 2017. If he can find the right guys, if he can find the right fit, if he can find players that are willing to come in and be able to get on this roster and fight hard and try to do the things that he wants them to do, I think there's a good opportunity to see success, just like Brian just alluded to. It's going to take some time, though. And I think the portal and NIL are going to be a big part of that. And I know it's frustrating for fans to see some of the money figures that are thrown out there and seeing players move around, willy-nilly like this. But this is just basically essentially what the sport has come to at this point. And you just have to find a way to do a better job of management. And you're seeing teams now spending more time getting GMs and more time talking to professional football leagues like the NFL and figuring out how they're going to be able to run their programs. And that's what UCF is going to eventually end up doing. They've hired a GM, and they're actually going to find a way to kind of go down that same path. I think it's all going to pay off in the end. But again, it all comes back to finding the right guys, not spending the most money. It comes to finding the right guys who are going to fit the profile that Scott has for this program.
All right. Thank you, Matt. And now my nightcap, it's going to focus on bowl season. So outside of the CFP, which will use 6 prominent bowl games, there are 36 other bowl games to consume throughout the holidays. Are there way too many bowls? Absolutely. It also has too many average teams being rewarded for going 500 with 6-6 records and the occasional 5-7 team because we don't have enough 6-6 teams. And now I introduce myself as a complete hypocrite. I'm going to watch nearly every damn one of them. I will give the 4-letter network credit. They own virtually all of the games, and they are feeding the appetite of us football fans who want to consume as much of it as possible as the season winds down. You'll notice that a lot of these games have virtually no attendance, like the Boca Bowl going on right now. It doesn't matter because these are made for TV events and corporate sponsorship dollars. And even when I watch a game with 2 6-6 teams, it warms my heart to find football on TV on a weekday afternoon during the most wonderful time of the year. And that wraps up this edition of To Your Point. For Matt Murschel, Brian W. Peterson, and Dali Drama, I'm Jeff Allen, wishing you happy holidays.